Hi, it's Conor Svensson here, founder and CEO of Web3 Labs. This is a conversation I had with Weiwu Zhang, CTO at AlphaWallet. Weiwu is a true token innovator. In our conversation, we go into a lot of depth about why tokens are the future of Web3 and why he believes they are its core fabric. We also discussed the Alchemy NFT platform, which the AlphaWallet team launched earlier this year, securing backing from Mark Cuban, among others. Weiwu and the AlphaWallet team have been very focused on tokens for 4 years now, going deep into their exploration of what's possible with them, looking at things such as autographing NFTs and token attestations. And it was absolutely fascinating to get his perspective on how they will change our everyday interactions online. Okay, Weiwu, it's great to have you here.
Great to have you too.
So you're the CTO at AlphaWallet. Tell me a bit more about how you got started with AlphaWallet. What was it that made you decide originally to focus on the wallet space as well as an opportunity for the business?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we didn't start AlphaWallet with a vision that wallet is going to be the most important thing in the industry, and we are going to be millionaires because we make good wallet. The starting point is actually, so I think before I do this wallet thing, I worked with my colleagues in Commonwealth Bank and participated a lot of. I was in the leadership role, technical leadership role, on a lot of blockchain experiments.
Yeah.
So what I see here is that the blockchain evolution will take us to the spot where we will make a lot of smart tokens. By smart tokens, I refer to tokens that have rich functionality, utility, and provide service and allow you to interact with the website. And the smart contract part of that is relatively easy, but there lack infrastructure for that to properly work, for the users to take a smart token and use it on the website. And that's going to be where the wallet innovation is badly needed. So we started AlphaWallet with the vision of innovating in this very specific section. However, the technology inside was actually way more complicated than we initially thought. I thought that we are going to have a fully working token script setup that holds smart tokens, talks to the web, give you functionalities in your mobile phone, tokens such as car tokens or rental tokens, these things. We thought that we are going to get ready in 1 year, but it just constantly needs to solve problems that makes a wallet actually useful for Ethereum. So I consider the current stage part of the journey where we are eventually going to be a smart token leader in a wallet. But right now we are open source leader in the space. We are the most popular open source Ethereum mobile wallet.
So when you talk about the smart tokens, so it was really the interest in tokens that brought you to the wallet rather than thinking we're going to do a wallet and then tokens came up.
Yes, that's typically in this space. Innovation happens like what I call now what, explore now what. So let's go to explore something, make it happen, and I think now what happens. I think by the opportunities ahead, also by the way I understand blockchain, I think we can have a vision of how blockchain is actually useful. So people say that the decentralized web is better than the not ordinary web, but how? Yeah. So the way we work is we actually have a vision how it's going to be different, how it's useful. And we're working towards that vision. But in the meanwhile, we try to be pragmatic and solve the real-world problem and real-world Ethereum user problem in the same way. So what I often say is we build tunnels from two sides. Imagine if you have a huge mountain and you want to dig tunnel. One side is you just explore and see what you can do. Yeah. And the other side is you have a vision where you are going to get after this, and we dig from both sides.
Okay. So going back to the start of AlphaWallet, how old's the company now? Is it like four years, something like that? Mm-hmm. It's been around for a while. It's not like you've just emerged, and so you've been focused on the technology for quite some time.
Yes, yeah.
And so at that point, when you started on it, I don't know if NFTs had even been, were a thing at that point. They've obviously gone massive in this last year, but going back to 2017 when like CryptoKitties, first emerged, was there, was that kind of on your radar in those early points, or was it, later on that it kind of emerged once you were already working on AlphaWallet?
We hold an evolutionary review on the token. We don't know how it will exactly evolve, but we have a rough idea where it is going to. So when we started AlphaWallet, we wanted to have something called smart token. Smart token refers to tokens that have utilities and services. So one example would be a car token, which allows you to open the car engine. It also provides service, for example, how to collateralize it or how to authorize someone else to manage the car, to give generate new keys for the car. This would be useful, for example, if you want to leave your car to generate revenue for you without having to go through the typical market friction of signing up new contracts and transfer the car key and stuff. Just do the blockchain transaction, can do that. So we think that that's where blockchain is heading, because what blockchain enables, the smart contract and the decentralized infrastructure, it enables innovation. It enables innovation that Google and Apple will find it hard to catch on, given that all the free thinking that can happen in the space, all the contracts you can write, all the functions you can add to tokens. Tokens will be smart. They will grow. That's a general view, but we don't know how it will grow there. In the beginning, it was ERC20 tokens, and then you have non-fungible tokens. And then we have non-fungible tokens with features. We have Alchemy is a good example where we add a lot of features to non-fungible tokens. But eventually, it will come. That's what I firmly believe, and our AlphaWallet team believes in the vision, that it will come to the point where we have smart tokens. We have vendor-supported, function-rich, service-rich that enable new markets, new competition, new ideas. We will have those. So although the popularity of an NFT wasn't something we see in the very beginning, we were ready to see token to evolve at any time. So it was not a complete surprise.
And thinking more about smart tokens and then being like a key enabler of the technology. Certainly, one of the people who's come up in the space and been quite vocal about their opinions here is Chris Dixon, and he had this recent tweet storm where he was talking about how he kind of sees tokens as being the new equivalent to a web page insofar as in the early days of the internet you had people created web pages and it was just they just consumed them, they just read them, and then as the technology really picked up, companies started to realize how they can provide a more interactive experience so that you have a back and forth, people provide data and they get something back in return. And with tokens, his view is that we're in those very early days where we're seeing some utility around, of course, for utility tokens, NFTs, but his view is that there's kind of this much wider picture of where they're going to go, and they're like this all new building block for the Web3, so to speak. And I guess that kind of lines up with your views here with respect to the ambitions with token scripts and smart tokens.
Exactly, and I totally agree with the view that token is now the new web. I'd like to dive deeper into the topic. They are very similar, and they are going to go through, the future will be full of tokens. And everything we say blockchain can do, they are going to be done by the tokens. Therefore, we have a huge range of different tokens. I'd like to go a little bit deeper and explain what's the difference between web page and token.
Definitely.
So there was a transition from Web 1 to Web 2, and that transition is mostly the transition from an info system to an application system. So the difference between those is info system is how you get information. Application system is how you do something. So example would be in the early days when in the Web 1 era, you would go to a web page, and you would read interesting stuff, and you would click through. Sometimes you go to a music band and you click through and you become interested in one person, a singer maybe, and you became interested in the clubs, and then you start to browsing all the time pleasant time, if you call it, was discovering information and having fun, just interacting with information. Today's internet is different. Today, when I use internet, half of my time I'm doing something. I'm signing up for the conference, and I'm making an appointment with you, for example, in this one, preparing a slideshow and discuss with team members about topic, and showing up in the conference, at each other in LinkedIn. Most of the time I'm acting. Internet is no longer an information system, it's an application system. And that is why internet today is centralized, because the application system would require points of trust, would require interconnecting integration points. And the previous giants like Google and Facebook naturally fits in that role. So today's token is like a web, not in the sense that it's a source of information or providing interactiveness. It's a source of integration where the functionalities, the utility and services anchor, so that web can be mobilized again, just like the previous information explosion in the early 2000s. We will see a functionality explosion, and then we will need to have the interconnecting components, which is the token. And that's why token is like the web. And also that's why token is not exactly the web.
And when you think about it, then in terms of a token, there's some very fundamental differences there because, for instance, you hold it, say, an AlphaWallet, for instance, and that token, it could be like a proof of attendance token, it could be a utility token, NFT, whatever else, and so. And they, of course, have their own notion of value associated with them. It can be just someone's own personal stuff, just like proof of attendance. That's something that they hold dear to them, that they went to this event that was quite a pivotal moment for them. Like the kind of the T-shirts with the legendary gigs that have happened over the years. People proudly wear them all these years later. But then on the other side, you have these... like we're seeing with NFTs, where they can shoot up in value and actually become investments in their own right. And so there no doubt will be other areas that grow out of this. But what are kind of the ones that you are quite excited or optimistic about at the moment in terms of where we're going to see it gather a lot more traction than what we see right now?
The tokens can give us so many things, but we don't know when will people use something first, when will people use something else. This is not entirely a technical area. We don't know how human acquired the habit of, for example, using Facebook first before they use, I don't know, like a Google photo.
Yeah.
So it's hard to answer that question from user's perspective, but I will explain what technology allows us to do.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned that a proof of attendance. So imagine that you meet someone in an event, and that someone gives you a token and say, hey, I saw you in the event, we are friends. Some kind of token, and then suppose you have many of them, then it potentially gives you proof of relationship that you can use to contact someone. Yeah. For example, if Bill Gates say that I will only contact people who know someone who know me, then you can give them a proof that you know someone who know you, right?
Yeah.
So you are able to build LinkedIn in decentralized way all the way up with such kind of stuff. The other example is once you have a car token, let's say it gives you car ownership and gives you control over your car, then you can use that to generate a proof and link it with the insurance token. So next time if you go to if you call the roadside assistance offered by the insurance company, they will look up the insurance and immediately verify if it's your car. And then you have all the things built on top of it, like a club membership, which relates to your car as well as your insurance. And later, if you want to leave your car to a company which makes money for you by renting it out, then they will want to see all of these tokens. So these tokens and tokens and tokens, they will combine, compose, and we will see rich functionalities, and we will see innovations we haven't seen before.
So hearing about it from that perspective, it certainly seems that there's parallels, of course, with what people have spoken about previously in terms of where the really big opportunities are for smart contracts. But with the narrative that you're talking about kind of takes it one step further, that says rather than having all these different smart contracts that get built up to provide these different services, it simplifies things a lot if you just use tokens instead, because then you have something that's common across all these different blockchain platforms. There are, of course, differences between the platforms and interoperability issues with it, but it's like a simple abstraction that people can get. Here's a token to show I've got this proof, rather than it be here's some code or service that lives on a smart contract that this company owns, and here's like some code that lives on another smart contract that some other one does. It's like the token is the common abstraction that people use as authenticity, really, to show proof of something.
Yes, and there will be a lot of smart contract working behind the token to make it really trustworthy. But token is what you use to interact with the web and interact with access the utility and interact with websites that uses token services. They do it through the token. This also provides potential where tokens from different blockchain can work together, but not on the previous all of blockchain linked together layer, but on the upper layer, token layer.
Right. And so if we think about it in terms of like traditional web analogies, HTTP was like the common protocol for people to talk to websites, and of course there's the the verbs around it like get, post, put, delete that became established, and they're simple building blocks that, although the end users typically only see it in terms of a web browser or an app, say, on their phone, the underlying technology is like HTTP was this key enabler really for a lot of the interactions there. And one could argue that potentially in Web3, the token becomes that equivalent, because that's the thing that everyone interacts via. And then behind the scenes, you've got all of these services that actually manage the tokens, provide all these additional integration points and so on.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned this. That analogy works. So you have a web resource, and you have put and get and delete, maybe, post. If we take that to token, then the most typical actions you can perform on token: proof of ownership, generate proof, which involve a cryptographic challenge and answer to that challenge, and you have transfer of ownership, and you have authorization, which gives you a resource identifier. So you authorize the aspect of tokens to someone. In the car case, you authorize someone to drive your car, which that authorization is, on the user level, is called a key, is a car key. But in crypto, we just call it authorization, which generates a attestation to you that a smart contract can validate, and you can use that attestation together with the key associated with that. As the borrower of the car, you can use that to start the engine. That's authorization. That's the most three frequent operations you do to token objects. But there are more, like tokens can develop their own.
And so presumably some of this ties in with your notion of smart tokens and token script. So it's an open source framework that you guys created, and presumably it provides like a common abstraction for a lot of these sorts of operations.
Yes. TokenScript was technology that was in AlphaWallet even since like really early version, in the 2018 version. At that time, we have a XML container which declares what token utilities are there, together with embedded HTML and JavaScript code and CSS, which directs. So if you imagine an XML file would say there is a put action, get action, there are things you can do, or things will like transfer or authorize and stuff. And then under every action, there's a link to the corresponding HTML and HTML and JavaScript component to run that one on the user interface. So what we do is architecturally we divide these actions into token utilities and token services. So token utilities, in case of a car, let's like open the car, open the door, unlock the door. And token services is like acquire a link token, for example, link a car with the insurance token. That will be a token service. So the difference is token utility is something users can do to the token. Like if you have a voting DAO token, you can vote, and you can do. Token services that you can use some token to do on a third-party website. And that third party is important because we are seeing more and more the future web being integrated and function-rich. And token is the mechanism which allows this third party to run their business, making the web system more open and more competitive. So it's really important that token services be available. When we started to do this, we demonstrated this technology with, for example, car vendors, and we also made the first FIFA ticket token in 2018, where you can redeem the token at one of the venue as a FIFA ticket redeem spot. And we actually tokenized about 100 FIFA tickets. So we did these experiments. That was very impressive experiments. It was at actually a crypto downtime. So people have less interest in crypto in 2019 as well. And in 2020, we see huge rise of DeFi. DeFi is a very important part of blockchain. It's not a smart token. DeFi is not smart token, but DeFi is very important. But the TokenScript technology doesn't have much interaction with DeFi. You can see some of the DeFi tokens, such as if you have a zero knowledge proof of wealth, for example, like Tornado, then you can potentially write a token script which displays you the balance, which you cannot do on the website, because if you do that, the website will already know the secret. So that's where token script can play, but it's not where the main part of token script is. The main part is to enable interaction with the services and with accomplished token utilities. So in that year, we because the users are growing and we have to satisfy demand, we have to fix it here and there to make it work with new DeFi protocol. So we just spent the year maintaining the product, didn't develop the TokenScript technology until later in that year and early this year we started to come back to TokenScript because we are seeing demands. For example, last Christmas we were very busy to accomplish the necessary attestation module, as you know, attestation related to authorization, so that DevCon can issue their tickets that is validated on the blockchain, but is not issued directly on the blockchain because they don't have a transfer use case so early, and they don't want to waste a lot of gas. And it's reasonable that you hold authorization as a token. So we developed this module, and we are getting the token services we mentioned that token actions either are token utilities or services, and we did the utility we did in experiments with car token and with FIFA tickets. The service part, we didn't do that, and this year we are picking that up as we see the demand is picking up as well. So with a bit of work, I think by the end of this year, maybe early next year, we will have the first version of Tokens Group that actually can do token services, which is to give you a token, allow you to use that to interact with the web. So that's where we are.
Okay. And I have to say, hearing more about how the service works, there's one thing that jumps up that's very widely used in Web 2 is the notion of cookies and a file that lives on someone's computer to identify them to a website. There's clearly crossover there as well. In effect, did you see in the future you could end up in this space though, where there's people have an abundance of tokens? With cookies, people's browsing habits, they have silly numbers of cookies on their computer because every time they go to a website, they receive multiple. Could we end up in this space where it's a similar problem with tokens? People are inundated with them, and it's
you're spot on. You're spot on. The technology to address this is called token negotiation. So we already thought about it.
Okay.
So token negotiation is a technology where a website shows that they are interested in certain type of tokens, and the user is able to select which token to be used on the website. So it cannot be like a cookie where the website simply detects your tokens. Otherwise, the website will display a page, and in the meanwhile learns that you have $1 million worth of Ether and you have 2 Porsche Cayenne. So you don't want this to happen. So when the website wants to use a token, it either does it automatically, which is it declares in the header, and then you will see, similar to the cookie notice, you will see available tokens listed on your mobile phone that you can click to make them usable to the website. Or of course you can by default disable that. Or that if you click certain functions on the web page, and that function would say, hey, use this function, we're interested in the following tokens. So for example, if you're not booking the ticket on the airline website, then presenting the passport token doesn't make sense. But if you're in the step 2, you already filled the form, where you want to go to, where you want to land. Then next step, the wallet will pop up and say they need an identity token. Which one of you want to use? You have an ID card, you have passport. And some of them allow you to do a zero-knowledge proof, so only prove that you have the document without giving it to them. Yeah. So this process where the website at a certain stage would need some token, and the wallet will find one that matches the criteria, similar to having a lot of cookies. From a lot of tokens, you find someone that matches the criteria. It's called token negotiation, and we have the first version of that library available. Although that version only works with attestation tokens, it doesn't work with blockchain tokens because we did it for DevCon, and that was prioritized. But we will eventually be able to negotiate all kinds of tokens, including Ether or Tornado, or in the future car tokens.
You touched briefly on identity there, and that's clearly another key application here. And what we're seeing, of course, within the finance sector is so much talk right now about central bank digital currencies, where you've got these central banks looking at ways of, controlling a blockchain-based money supply. So there's a lot of inefficiencies in the system right now. If we think about identity, do you feel that there's a similar direction where we could be headed? Because no doubt with this vision of the future you're talking about here, someone's passport or identity card becomes a token, and then that still would no doubt be issued by a central authority, say the issue of the passport or the identity card. But do you think that we'll see in the coming years this similar levels of interest in that sort of application of the technology as we have with these central bank digital currencies? I think central bank digital currencies are a useful one to pin on, just because it's a very serious kind of government institution that's typically interested in these, whereas, and likewise, identities, it has those strong ties with the governments as well, and so it strikes me that there seems like there could be quite a natural fit there to do it, as long as they continue to maintain control of issuing these, in their case, these verified credentials as tokens that represent passports, and then presumably they can revoke them as well if someone has their crypto wallet stolen or something else. Is that a future that you think about or you can see panning out in the near future?
Okay, so you brought two interesting points. One being that how will central bank play in this game, and the other will be like how central authority issued identities will be used. So the first one, central bank's motivation of issuing central bank money is not to make your life easier. It's to make their job easier, and their job being control the supply of credit. So they will not be able to give you any meaningful product, because their goal is too far-fetched from your everyday life. And the uptaking will be a problem unless they work with banks. So the most likely scenario is that every bank will issue their own banking app, which has central bank money enabled in it. So you will still have the banking relationship. Some people will actually hold central bank money directly in their wallet, but the quality of service will be low, and people will not like it. I think this will eventually happen. It's just the ever-going competition between the decentralized money and the centralized money. It will just go on, and people will still slowly choose to use decentralized money because of the limited supply, and the central bank will still push this agenda. It will be a battle for a really long time. I don't know how long it will take, though. I'd rather focus on what we can do in the decentralized area. Speaking of identity, the government has the capacity to provide digital identity, and it was possible even before blockchain, because you don't have to involve transaction logic. You don't transfer identity to a son. So you can solve it with traditional. You don't auction them. You can solve it with traditional cryptography. So the real showstopper, I would say, is not the availability of technology. It's something to do with the public acceptance and the political will behind making it happen. If you look at Estonia, for example, they have this digital residence, which is a digital identity, and you can use that to generate proof. It has the token-like feature. You even have a card, and you can do request a proof. You can request a signature, which is similar to authorization. You can already do that. So my thinking is, if it doesn't depend on blockchain technology, and its uptaking is so slow, then even with blockchain technology, it probably won't change. So we should be seeing other tokens going first, like a car token, like your special membership token, even an NFT token that with some rights attached. These will take off first.
So it's more about these enterprising businesses that see opportunities for them to jump on board, and that will help normalise the notion of people say having a common wallet where they have a number of different assets in there that provide different services, such as loyalty or the car token or whatever else, and then from there there'll be governments might eventually play catch up and say, okay, let's jump on here, because everyone's using like a digital asset wallet now.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving on from smart tokens and token scripts, something that I guess launched, but came up on my radar, I guess, this year, and was Alchemy NFT, which was a new platform that you guys launched, and you managed to secure some quite high-profile backing there as well. Is this a project that just kind of came together this year, or is it something you'd been working on for a while? But as with all these things, they take a fair bit of work goes into getting you to where you are.
It's a little bit. So Alchemy NFT is reflected the way we think. Actually, we are going to give ourselves something lab, because the way we think is we want to formalize it and make a lab out of it. We will see that coming out soon. So our team always have this view that there will be evolution around tokens. So once we see that NFT got popular, the first question we ask ourselves is, where will evolution take us? And the answer is, you will want to have a lot of added properties to these NFT tokens. So, for example, what the NFT gives you certain rights, but you might want to subdivide these rights, like the right to display it and the right to use it in a project. You might want to divide it. You might want to use that right to derive new NFT tokens too. So one way to derive it is if you have a duck, then you might want to have it colored in different ways, and these are all originated from the same piece of art, which might have value in their own way. Or that you might divide that into the usage right as well as the right of the NFT. You might divide it, and you might have a rental right, or you might have a subdivision right. You want to do things to it. So that's a natural way where NFT is going. so we think it's quite natural.
Yeah.
The reason we call it an alchemy is because we do magic to NFT and make it into something else, which potentially have more value, or a number of something else, which has a lot of new properties. The project is in its relatively early stage. We have a working example of that, which is to add autograph to it, which is already online and people are using it. We get a lot of good feedback. You mentioned that we have backing, we have prominent investors such as Mark Cuban in the game in the early stage. But I think it's more of a meeting of minds happening here. That he sees that, okay, if we are here, where are we going to be there, next step? And I think he agrees with what we are seeing, that NFT is going to have more features, and then going to have more derived rights and derivations itself, and functions like adding autograph. Yeah. So we are working towards that direction. What will come out of that is going to be a cluster of smart contracts exploring different ways of using NFT tokens. And it goes quite well with TokenScript as well, because we are going to add a token layer to it through TokenScript technology. I'm really looking forward to see how this function-rich token is going to play the role in the ecosystem. What we are seeing today is not going in that direction, but we will see things in going that direction. What we see today is it expands the breadth. The NFT space is expanding the breadth, but not the depth. So you like a cartoon duck, I give you a cartoon duckling, and I give you cartoon bird, and I give you different birds. And
it's kind of just variations on the same theme.
Once you finish all the birds and all the punks, you start with the robots. You will see a lot of different robots and alien lives, I don't know. So we see supply and demand. People want to have NFT. Then people produce a lot more NFT. But supply and demand also work in the depth direction. People will more and more value the tokens with more functions and derivatives. And that's what will happen, I think.
Yeah. Okay. And so really the Alchemy NFT, it's had a lot of prominent support because of the autograph functionality. You've had well-known people. I think Vitalik signed an NFT that then got auctioned for charity, and so that's just like almost one of the initial experiments. But you envisage going a lot deeper though with where it can go.
We think that there will be a lot of features, a lot of derivations from NFT. Autograph is just one that we want to test. Like, is this where people will really want to have it? And then we want to test a lot of other ideas, and this will be where competition will be. Maybe later this year or maybe next year. This will be the core battlefield for competition in the NFT space. Yeah. After this, there will be smart tokens. But right now, we are adding features one by one to the tokens.
Yeah. And so then tied in with this, and no doubt there is crossover with the work that you've been doing previously with AlphaWallet. The Alchemy team have spoken about their universal login technology too, and that being another area of interest. Is that something that's you're looking at with Alchemy, or is it something that's kind of more tied in with the smart tokens and some of the existing work?
Oh yeah, so one of the early revelation we had when we make token-based projects, even 4 years ago when I was leading the projects in the Commonwealth Bank in Australia, was that key-based authentication was really hard to accomplish for a few reasons. So more practical solution is to have identifier attestation associated with tokens. So rather than they say that this token belongs to Ethereum key 0x505, you see that this token belongs to the owner of that is identified by a Twitter handle or an email address. Yeah. And then you later have a attestation to prove that the Ethereum address is linked to that. So the reasons for that is sometimes reasonable to change the key because you might lose it or you might expose it, or that for adoption reasons some people will get a token before they even get a key. So the token has to be identified by something else. So that's one thing that differentiates us from early Web3 authentication, key-based authentication. Yeah. We try to do this on an attestation layer, not on the key layer, not on direct key association with tokens. And this is what the technology we provided to DevCon. You will see that being used. So that's one difference between existing the authentication. The other difference is I think that we will enter the area where authentication is more about tokens than identities. So say if you go to Steam apps, buy a computer game, then what works is you might have some cash, you can buy it, Ether or whatever. You might have a privilege token. For example, you previously bought Halo 3, so you can buy Halo 4 at a discount. And you might have achievement tokens, which helps you to maybe get a discount or get expansion pack. And you might have a proof of age, which makes you access nudity and violent content. So all these tokens work together. They are not tied to, say, a single identity. They are just at different stages. You might want to use them. For example, if you want to see the list of age 18 games, then you need to show the token. That is not related to the part where you check out. When you check out, you might spend your Ether. But when you want to see the listing, including nudity, then you want to use some token. So in the interaction, different stage of interaction will require different tokens. And I think that authentication should be on. It's more useful for authentication to be buried into token. So it's like, show me the token, use the token, rather than taking authentication as a problem to solve and say you are either logged in or not logged in. Yeah. So the scenario I described, there is no prominent login process. Yeah. You just use tokens and all the way. And I think this will open doors for a lot of innovation. At the beginning, it's difficult to mentally accept it, because you want to log in. And the reason you want to log in is because you didn't have token. Your mind was staying with Web 2, where you have an identifier, and that decides everything. We will see a shift once token plays a more prominent role.
Yeah. Again, it's kind of taking it back to what we were saying earlier about the cookie analogy, similarities. Is there not this real risk, though, of people getting inundated with them? Because I can almost see this future where every subscription I have a token. Potentially every significant purchase I make that's not groceries or consumables, I have a token. Are people not going to get overwhelmed with like the number of tokens that they have to manage? Because if you have a wallet, I think you could quite quickly end up with tens of thousands of them in your day-to-day life.
You probably will. And it probably will be a management hassle. You're right. I think it's less of a management hassle if these things that represent your rights are distributed on different websites. Like, it's less of trouble. Not today people remember so many username and password everyone on a website. And then if you want to access your points or your silver card in Qantas airline, you need to go to Qantas website. So you need to keep a set of username password. And you need to know where your token is. So it's already very complicated. The number of tokens we're going to have is probably going to be equivalent or less than the number of passwords you keep for every website, because you can use one token to log into multiple websites. Yeah. But importantly, you don't have to remember the relationship. You don't have to say that I have the game control, but I don't remember where it is. Let me go to Origin, log into Origin, and let me log into Steam Play, and no, it's not here. Where is my game? I've played this game, and now I don't know where it is. Yeah. So today is even worse.
Yeah. But is there not also a risk, though, that with Google, Facebook, Amazon, all of these companies that have significant weight, in that future they just issue a token, and so right now you have your sign in with Google, and all of a sudden I've got my Google token, and that replaces what I've used on all these other sites, but I'm still relying on Google's issuance there. Yes, you might be able to control the information more readily, but all it takes is them to adopt that, and then it's going to squash a lot of the innovation and what people are trying to build out potentially is separately in Web3.
All of the things I mentioned that can be accomplished by token can already be accomplished and will be accomplishable through Google or through Apple. There's nothing new on that perspective. The only thing is whether or not Google and Apple is able to do this fast enough and innovative enough. So this will be a time we really test the theory of free market. Yeah. So let's take let's take Apple for example. You can already have your car key in Apple. You can already open your car, start the engine with Apple mobile phone. Yeah. If you previously set up the custodianship, and in this case you're actually giving the car control to Apple. Yeah. And later you are asking Apple to do this and that, which is similar to if you have a token, except that Apple controls everything. And then suppose there is a startup and says that, okay, Apple, we need a new feature. We need to have not only send your key to our friends. we need a new feature called authorized management feature, because I want to manage this car for 3 months. I will be able to generate new keys in that 3 months. And the reason I want to do this at Apple is because I have a new startup idea where the unused cars will be used through delegated management. Let's say do this. And Apple will say, okay, so what's in it for me? And this is the things going on here. This will not be the conversation with token will be different. Like token issuers, like car token makers, they want their car to be everywhere on the street. They want the maximum market access. Where Google and Apple, they want market access that benefits them, and they each have a moat against their ecosystem. So if the free market theory still works, then a free market will prevail.
It'll definitely be interesting to see how it pans out anyway with them, and certainly it does feel like those companies haven't really embraced the decentralization as much as, well, certainly they could do, but with Facebook's recent rebranding to focus on the metaverse and so on, I think it'll certainly be fun to see what innovations come out of that. Going back to universal login, one of the things that's come up recently was the Ethereum Foundation putting out a request for proposals on this notion of universal login using Ethereum. So rather than making use of these OAuth services where you hook in with a Facebook login, a Twitter one, LinkedIn, whatever else, they want to work with companies who are looking to use Ethereum to solve that. Does that tie over with the universal login and attestations that you've been talking about, or is that kind of something different?
We actually submitted a proposal to them, and I haven't heard from Ethereum Foundation. Maybe they will accept it, maybe they will not. Their angle was, so we have a huge cross section, but the way the angle is different. Ethereum Foundation is more looking at how to improve the adoption of Ethereum by making Ethereum-based authentication more accessible to the traditional developers, and also how to make it easier to ramp new users. This is the angle they come from. They chose a problem that was bothering Web2 developers for a long while. Usually you have to rely on Google to do this. So they are trying to compete directly with Google. My view angle is mostly from token. What innovation can we enable token to do? So there's a cross section in both will address the authentication problem, and there are protocol details that both Ethereum Foundation Token Script both care about. We are providing a proposal that is utilizing what we know as the best practice, as well as being as compatible as possible with the future token-based economy. I hope they will accept this direction. And I think it was what we propose is an improvement over most of the existing use cases. For example, usually in our proposal, a key will be generated for the session, and its expiration is controlled by a few parameters. While in the traditional web authentication, the Ethereum key is used directly, which creates two problems. First, Ethereum key is associated with asset, the use of which will potentially endanger the asset. And second, you don't have session control. If the user log into a different computer, and you cannot click a button and say log me off or every other device, because there's no control over that, right? So our proposal has this considered. Let's hope it's accepted.
Yeah. It's good to hear about the differences though with that approach, and how, like you say, looking at it from a token-centric perspective is more powerful and helps avoid some of these challenges with it.
Yes, and so not all tokens will be authenticated based on the same Ethereum key for security reasons and for use case reasons. Some tokens have its own authentication mechanism, so it's better to enclose the authentication in token and try to make it as silent as possible.
So moving on from Alchemy and tokens and everything else, you're here in the UK at the moment for COP26.
Yes.
And so what is it that's, I guess, caught your interest that's made you choose to travel over here for the conference, given where you're currently focused?
First, no matter which industry you are working in, you are going to be affected by the climate change, unless you still don't believe in the climate change or that has anything to do with human activity. We may not be able to solve the climate change. I'm not very optimistic about it, but everybody should be aware. And I have two kids, and you have two kids too. So there's no reason to not to be interested simply because, hey, this is not my area of focus.
Absolutely.
But the angle I come from is mostly how trading mechanism will solve the tragedy of commons problem. So what we are facing here is The problem we're facing is there has to be adequate amount of climate action to reduce emission, and that either comes from the government or it comes from the market. Coming from the government is not a very good idea because most people believe that government is already too big and doesn't have our interest in mind. And the government expenses probably will be misaligned with climate goals. A more efficient way to do that is to utilize market so that carbon emission is priced in. And the way to do that is to allow carbon credit trading in the free market. So a company can reduce their carbon footprint, therefore reduce the price they have to pay, and therefore they have a more competitive price on their end product. So this is I think this is a really efficient way because it uses free market to allocate resources. However, I always have this. I say this a lot. Like you need 3 legs for the stool, unless it's a bar stool. Yeah. You need 3 legs for the stool. The 3 legs are technology, in this case, carbon trading mechanism. Yeah. And policy or the political will. Yeah. So you have to be certified so that your product can be sold as a carbon accounted form, right? And then you have to have market participation. So what I'm afraid is, and what happened in the past, is that blockchain technology alone will not save it. If there is no support from if there are no policy support, and if there is no market participation. So every year, when last year the COP didn't happen, every year I'm keen to observe that whether or not the political will is growing to the point where the policy is practical and the market participants are willing enough. Yeah. And if that is the year, then I think the technology will be useful, and we should be really looking at how to use technology in the community as well as from our labs and our investors' point of view. So my goal here to COP is mostly awareness. It doesn't make sense if there are 2 other legs missing and I devote my life into a carbon credit trading system and just waste my creative years. But if the condition is good, then everybody should be interested to use blockchain to help solving our climate crisis.
And certainly with the Paris Agreement, in terms of the language that's been used in it is much more friendly towards decentralized technologies rather than, this is predecessor to the Kyoto Protocol had wording about having these centralized data stores where they capture a lot of emissions and reporting information, whereas with the Paris Agreement, it's sort of more embraces this idea of decentralization. And the World Bank have got their climate warehouse, which they're looking at a way of aggregating a lot of this data there. And people like Microsoft, they've made these very public announcements about what they intend to do with respect to getting to net zero, I think by 2030, and then eliminating all of their prior carbon emissions by 2050. And certainly organisations like that are trying as well to make inroads here, but there's still certain challenges further up the chain, like the work that actually eliminates carbon offsets, for instance, the inadequate technology in place to ensure that the data is being captured well at source about, say, these trees being planted and then them ultimately being certified as these think of them as tokens really that represent the removal of carbon offsets. So there's a lot of challenges that exist in the space there, but no doubt it's going to be fascinating to have all of those leaders there and everything else and see what they're saying.
Yes, there are a lot of problems and there are a lot of solutions too. The previous Paris Agreement was a good one. The thing is, it was not formed with strong consensus. This year it's different. After 2 rounds, like natural disasters, and then we have COVID, people are more aware of the predicament we are in. Humanity is in a really delicate balance of moving parts. So there's a hope that this year the will is stronger from the global consensus from the nations that the problem you are describing, there will be a will to seek solution for these problems. So previously, like for example, carbon credit, like how do you certify a tree being issued? Well, you can create a cryptographic attestation, but how do you know the attestation is true? Well, you need to have someone to solve the dispute, or a smart contract to solve the dispute. There are solutions. These solutions are not cheap, but there are solutions. But you need the will. You need everybody to agree that we need to come up with solutions for these problems. And that's what I come to the COP to learn. So my journey is is the one that gives me awareness on like the pilgrimage for wisdom, not for direct action. Once I get the wisdom, once I know, okay, it feels like now humanity can take on this problem, then action.
Yeah, your mind's had the time to process everything that you've learned there.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Well, hopefully there'll be some good outcomes here with everyone getting together after it was delayed for so long as well.
Yeah, there are already promising projects, and some of the projects are utilizing a lot of consensus will, like the business leaders. I will learn more about that, and given opportunity, I will write a blog post after COP conference.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. I look forward to that. So, Weiwu, just in terms of wrapping up our conversation now, if people want to keep abreast of everything that's happening with AlphaWallet and Alchemy NFT and also TokenScript and contact you, what are the places that they should head to and place or social handles they should follow?
And first, follow our Twitter. So our Twitter currently handle is still AlphaWallet, but we are going to rebrand and have a lab behind it, and so that AlphaWallet is one of the components, and we have Alchemy and other and TokenScript will all come in. But if you subscribe to AlphaWallet, you will get notified of that line of activities, and then. We will publish Alchemy white paper very soon, and then TokenScript already have a paper. It was a few years old, but because TokenScript's idea is a little more ahead, you will not hear about TokenScript's immediate smart token thing for a few months. We will update that once we have the negotiator for DevCon. We will publish on Twitter as well, and we will publish intermediate paper to explain where we are now compared to when the first paper was produced like 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But Twitter is the most important way to keep in touch with us. We also have a Discord channel. It should be easy to find with.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Weiwu, it's been an absolute pleasure to host you today, and great that you're able to make it over to London as well to have this chat.
Thank you for allowing me into your house to do this project.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Weiwu.
Thank you.